skies through the night. However, it's relatively mild towards the northwest because here we've got a southerly airflow, and there'll be colder conditions across central and eastern parts of the UK because of the light winds. A lot of low cloud once again to start off Friday, but a change on the way for the weekend. Less fog, brighter skies, but with an increased easterly breeze, it's going to feel colder.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. I'm wondering, by the way, how are your heads today? Did you watch the football? Did you have fun? Did you enjoy England's victory? Or are you Welsh? Wishing it had gone the other way. Tell me your thoughts if you watched the football last night. But coming up tonight, more strikes. One of these days, everyone. I'm going to start with some positive, upbeat news. Today, though, it's not it. More strikes. Ambulance staff this time. 999 callers, ambulance drivers, of course, nurses as well. We've heard that nurses in children's hospitals, places like Great Ormond Street as well, will be going on strike. Goodness gracious me. Do you think it's time, basically, for the government to give in and give them what they want or not? Tell me your thoughts on that. And, you know, this whole ULEZ thing, the tax, basically, on older cars in London, it's expanded. It is, of course, happening up and down the country, not just in London. And it's made me ponder, do you think, basically, that we're going to get to the point where driving is only going to be the preserve of the rich? Is that the plan? Was it the plan all along? And talking about working, do you work 5 days a week? Would you like to work only 4 but get the same amount of money? Yes, please, if my boss is watching, I won't mind that, quite frankly. But what do you make to this? Do you think that actually it is time to change the way we work and do less days, less hours? I want your thoughts on that. And speaking of working, the Labour Party wants to have less sanctions on those people that don't work. Are they right or wrong? Again, your thoughts on that. But first, before we get into that, let's bring ourselves up to speed on tonight's latest headlines.
Thank you, Michelle. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Prince of Wales says there's no place for racism in society. The statement coming after a royal aide was forced to resign over comments made at a reception. Ngozi Fulani, who's the founder of a domestic abuse charity, says she was repeatedly asked by Prince William's godmother where she really came from. Lady Susan Hussey then challenged her after she told her she was born in the UK and is British. Kensington Palace says the comments were unacceptable and it was right for her to step aside with immediate effect. More than 10,000 ambulance workers have voted to strike across 9 trusts in England and Wales next month. They're joining thousands of 999 call handlers, ambulance technicians and paramedics who are also set to walk off the job. Other strikes will hit National Rail as well as other train operators, and more than 100 Eurostar staff will stop work. The announcements follow today's action by university and college union members and postal workers. The RMT's Mick Lynch says industrial action is their only option.
We cannot wait for policymakers, professional politicians, the people that have put us here in the first place to come and save us. What's going to work is a wave of industrial action organised by the trade unions standing up for themselves.
The government has asked police for the use of 400 cells to house prisoners because of overcrowding. Prisons Minister Damien Hines told MPs there's been an unprecedented increase in the number of offenders over the last few months. He says it's partly due to the Criminal Bar Association strike over the summer, which saw more people on remand. HSBC will close 114 bank branches across the UK. It says the decision comes as remote banking soars in popularity, with mobile app users almost tripling since 2017. The bank has also seen a decline in footfall since the COVID pandemic. It plans to invest tens of millions of pounds updating its remaining branches. A major trial of an experimental Alzheimer's drug has shown for the first time that early stages of the disease can be slowed. Scientists found after 18 months the drug stalled the disease progression by 27% compared with patients taking the placebo. However, experts warn as the medicine works during the initial stages of the disease, most won't benefit unless there's a revolution in spotting it. The results published in the New England Journal of Medicine have been hailed as the beginning of the end. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of being weak during a heated PMQs this afternoon. Rishi Sunak came under fire from the opposition over private school funding, failure to maintain house building targets and the latest series of industrial action. Both party leaders also questioned each other over the support of their backbench MPs.
I've heard he's having a relaunch. Apparently it's called Operation Get Tough. So how tough is he going to get with his backbenchers who are blocking the new homes this country so badly needs?
Mr. Speaker, we're delivering record numbers of new homes under this government. That's what we're doing. He talks about toughness, Mr. Speaker. He's too weak to stop dozens of his own MPs joining the picket lines.
Matt Hancock has revealed he was paid £45,000 to appear on the TV show Celebrity SAS Who Dares Wins. In an update to the MP's Register of Interest, it's also been revealed the former Health Secretary spent 80 hours filming the show while Parliament was in recess between September the 24th and October the 8th. And the Prime Minister has visited a Christmas market on Downing Street, a warning the following contains flashing images. Rishi Sunak and his wife visited the food and drinks market at number 10, promoting British small businesses over the Christmas period. They spent their time speaking to business owners, smelling candles and an array of cheeses. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for for that, Tatiana. Well, I'm with you right through until 7 o'clock this evening, keeping me company tonight. We've got Martin Wright, who's the chair of Positive News, bringing us lots of positivity. We like that, don't we, in today's doom and gloom era? And Charlotte Pickles, the director of the Reform think tank. Let me ask you, though, on a serious note, by the way, because I've got to be honest, sometimes I feel quite depressed. I do. My job is to read the news, look at everything that's going on, and I feel like all the time, every single day, I've just got back off a week's holiday where I was nice and relaxed. I open all the papers again on Monday morning, I'm like, oh my goodness. It is quite depressing. What is there to be positive about?
Oh, there's a lot to be positive about.
Give me something.
Well, there was one thing that is in our upcoming issue of Positive News, a plumber up in Burnley, who was so disappointed at seeing the way that some elderly people in their homes were being conned by other plumbers, that he set up a little network of plumbers to do work for them, to diagnose problems and so on, either free of charge or at a price they could afford.
Or whatever it's called.
Sorry?
Is this DEFRA or whatever it's called?
Yes, that's the one.
Yes,
yeah.
I know about that one. I have heard about it, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's an example of ordinary person getting out there, doing something positive, doesn't always get picked up by the mainstream press, which is a shame.
It gets picked up by GB News. I've seen him on here.
Well done.
Yeah, we do. I do. I actually think that guy is remarkable because you see some of the... he shares a lot of the stuff on his social medias. You see the state of some of the houses, some of the boilers that people have been left in predicaments, and he goes around and him and his people, they sort it out. There you go. That was nice. That was a nice...
There we are.
Have you got anything positive you want to tell me, Charlotte, today?
Oh, gosh.
No.
You've been reading the papers too much, haven't you?
I'm putting you on the spot, aren't I?
I've just been reading all the depressing news, but I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Great. And actually, there is, if you think about everyday people and all the little things they do on a daily basis to help each other, I actually think we don't get a true picture when we watch the news about the kind of, in local communities, what people are actually doing to support each other.
I got some positivity the other day, by the way. When I came back off my holiday, I asked you guys, have you put your Christmas decorations up yet? And I asked you for some pictures. And on the way home from that show, I really enjoyed, actually, having a little nose at your Christmas decorations, seeing what you've got up and where. And that cheered me up, I have to say, no end. It got me a little bit further into the Christmas spirit, so it did. Anyway, I want your thoughts on the stories that we'll be discussing tonight. The strikes, of course, ambulance staff, nurses, you name it, pretty much anyone, quite frankly, seems to be going on strike these days. What is the answer? Should the government give in or not? And I want to talk to you about 4-day working weeks, the sanctions, the benefit sanctions for those people that are not in work, and you, Les, the whole charges now for the older cars. Is that fair or not? You can get in touch with me, GB Views, at gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me as well, at GBNews. And if you're sitting there, by the way, shouting at your telly saying, I have got positive news, you can tell me that as well. Why not, say? But our top story tonight, I've just mentioned pretty much everyone, quite frankly, seems to be going on strike these days. Rail workers, posties, nurses, lawyers, universities, staff. Well, now ambulance workers will be doing the same as well. And someone just emailed me in, Dan the man, you tell me your name is, saying stop calling lots of these ambulance workers basically drivers. You say they're a lot more than that, technicians and so on and so forth. I'll take your point on board. I think it's a very fair one. Anyway, the point is that many of them now in England and Wales have voted to walk out in the pay dispute. In fact, actually, I'll start with you on this, Charlotte. What they're asking for is basically RPI inflation plus 5%. That can be around 19% pay rise. This is the nurse I'm talking about as well. Do you think that it's time for the government just to say, you know what, we don't want all these services to stop. Whatever you're asking for, we'll pay it?
No, absolutely not. And there are several reasons why I don't think that's an option. And look, we should all recognise, particularly actually with nurses, with some paramedics and other ambulance staff, these are not the well-paid people within the health service. If you want to talk about consultants or doctors, actually they're very well paid. But this group of people are not particularly well paid. But giving in, if that's the right phrase to use, and giving those sorts of pay rises, let's be clear, will cost billions, absolutely billions of pounds And where does that money come from? Well, it comes from taxpayers, because we can't borrow more. We're already this year going to spend £120 billion on servicing
But
debt.
we seem to find billions for everything, whether it's the Ukraine war, whether it's this, that, or the other crisis here, there, crisis there. So why we seem to find billions for things? So why not billions for this?
So I think, again, there are several things to say. Part of why you want to have sound public finances is so that when you have a crisis, for example, the pandemic, you can afford to spend more. You know, had we not had that period of what technically people call fiscal consolidation, what is more popularly known as austerity, actually we wouldn't have had the public finances that allowed us to spend 400 billion. Now, you can argue whether or not we should have spent 400 billion during the pandemic, but because we had more stable public finances, we could do that. You know, the Ukraine war, I mean, we obviously hope that's a kind of once in several generation crisis, but of course you need to respond to that. This is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about building in, if you're talking 20%, and if you give 20% to nurses, you've got to give it to the other public sector workers, or at least in health. If you build that in, that's not a one-off cost you can recover from. That's now built in forever. And we don't have billions and billions of pounds. Those taxes are paid by people earning less than some of the people in the health service. So no, we have to find a settlement. We absolutely should be raising wages, particularly for those who are lower paid in the health service. But we absolutely, I'm afraid, cannot afford to be giving the sort of pay rises that they're asking for.
Let me ask you this at home, by the way, because I think Charlotte does raise a very good point, which is if you want to give pay rises, it has to be paid for out of taxes. So let me ask you this. If you are someone that supports the strikes, maybe you're a nurse, ambulance technician, whatever, and you want a pay rise, would you be willing to pay more tax to basically generate that cash? So if you're a strike supporter, you're on the side of the people's pay rises, would you be willing to fund it? That's my question to you at home. Martin, where do you stand on it all?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because there are two issues about this. If we're looking particularly at public sector workers, particularly at frontline workers, like ambulance workers, paramedics, etc., there's an issue of merit, whether they deserve it or not, and there's an issue of pragmatism. So in the case of merit, you can say it's quite hard for the government to back inflation matching increases for pensioners and for benefits, which they have done, and then say, well, frontline workers can't have pay that matches inflation. That's a tricky one. Now, arguably, there's some more deserving cases than others, and I think everyone would put the frontline NHS workers near the top of the list when it comes to deserving a pay rise. But there's also the pragmatism aspect. The supply and demand. You know, we live in a society where unemployment is quite low, where a lot of people are leaving the NHS and finding jobs elsewhere. If we don't give them enough money so that they stay in the NHS, then we could have a real critical shortage. Then suddenly you're not waiting an hour for an ambulance, you're waiting 3 or 4 hours for an ambulance because we simply don't have the people there. So I think it's both a question of working out, OK, what's a reasonable offer in terms of what do people deserve, what do we feel good about, but also what do we need to pay to make sure that when we have a heart attack, an ambulance will turn up. Yeah. And it's tricky. You know, there's a negotiation underway. Obviously, the initial ask by the union is not what they expect to get. They know there's going to be some to and fro. But it's very tricky. I'm glad I'm not in charge.
Yeah, over in Scotland, for example, some of this strike stuff has been suspended for the moment because a pay offer was made, which has basically been put out to members for consideration. And what they're saying is that their pay offer basically amounts to around about 11.3% for the lowest paid staff and around about 7.5% on average. Do you think that's reasonable?
I don't know what the numbers look like in Scotland. I absolutely think that it is a very good principle to say that those who are lowest paid should get the greatest increases. So I would, you know, the principle of that approach, I think, is a good one. But ultimately, it's nice to think we could do what everyone deserves. It's nice to think there's a bottomless pit of money out there that we can use to do exactly that. But I'm really sorry there isn't. So it does come back to, Michelle, your point of, do we want to put up taxes? And that wasn't terribly popular when our now PM and previously Chancellor increased national insurance. In fact, it was very unpopular to do that. So if you're not willing to do that, where are you going to take the money from? Because we are talking about billions. You know, we're not talking about an insignificant amount. Do you want to cut the education budget? Do you want to cut the transport budget? Do you want to cut defence? Because the money has to come from somewhere. There isn't a magic money tree.
But you see, people will be frustrated, right? Because most decent people want your everyday workers, your nurses, whatever it is. You want these people to be able to get by and provide for themselves and families. That's why you go to work in the first place, right? So that's what everyone probably has the same aim. And they'll be listening to you and they'll be saying, oh, like fiscal consolidation or whatever, sensible finances and all the rest of it. But then they will hear reports of things like, whatever it is now, I've lost count of the total. I think we're on something like £7 million a day or something, £6-7 million a day on people crossing the channel in hotels. And people will sit there and get infuriated because they will say, we can find this money to do all of these different things. And you're saying, oh, well, that's a one-off thing, the Ukraine war, whatever, these hotels, whatever. But actually, the sense that people are getting is there is a real injustice. Now, people are paying their taxes, they're going to work, they're doing the right thing, and their taxes are being spent on things that many are saying is wrong in the terms
I think
of
you're
people
absolutely
not getting
right.
good wages.
I think it is outrageous. We are spending millions of pounds on putting asylum seekers, many of whom, as we know, most of whom are illegal immigrants at that point, in hotels. I don't know why the government hasn't come up with some type of rapid building of temporary accommodation in order to do this. I think, though, it's unhelpful to say, because we're spending money in this area, we should build in an extra 10 billion, 20 billion of cost over here. Now, again, I am incredibly sympathetic, particularly, as I say, to the low-paid. Nurses are pretty low-paid. Junior doctors, actually, are very low-paid. And we should do something about that. And
but
some
they
of the
expect to do
paramedics
well going down the line, which is why that's persisted
and there are
over the
progression
years.
routes. For example, if you start off as a paramedic and you become a consultant paramedic, you could be earning upwards of £70,000. There are progression routes for paramedics, which is one of the groups that we're seeing going on strike. And I do think, Michelle, it is worth us remembering that the common factor here, although Royal Mail is actually now private, it didn't used to be, the common factor here is that these are public sector workers. There are many more, in fact, 80% of the workers in this country are in the private sector, of whom many of those are on even lower wages, and they're not going out on strike. And so I think we can't have a different treatment. We need a fair settlement for low-paid public sector workers, but a fair settlement isn't those low-paid private sector workers paying more tax to fund additional payments. So I think we have to be a little bit careful. And, private sector wages have gone up, I think it's about an average of 6.5%.
Final brief word to you. Have you got one?
It would be interesting to explore binding arbitration agreements because those have been tried elsewhere in Europe with mixed success.
A lot of people won't know what you mean, so just...
OK, the idea is that the unions and the government agree that there will be an independent arbitrator that will decide what the right pay offer is, what the right pay deal is, and that they both agree to accept it, and in return for that, the unions agree to not go on strike for a number of years.
We do have bodies that look at what pay should be.
We do have those, but we don't have binding arbitration. It's been tried elsewhere in Europe. In some places, it's been more successful than others, but it'd be interesting to experiment with it more here.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's divided you, this issue at home, and I can understand why, because it's really difficult, isn't it? Everybody wants people to be paid fairly for the work they do. Nobody in their right mind would want anyone to be struggling going to work right now and struggling. And then the flip side of that is people are very concerned about the impact on care. And of course, don't forget, by the way, there are rules in place in terms of the levels of care. It has to be safe care, etc. Emergency does have to be covered, just to make that point clear. But Malcolm says, Michelle, those who withdraw their labour in the NHS should be ashamed. They were supported by the public. They've received discounts off their shopping and still do. They were given free or reduced fares. And Captain Tom raised millions to help them during lockdown. And now this is how they're repaying us. So I have to say, it is divided. Lots of you are on the side saying give them what they want. But you're not answering my question, though. Would you be prepared to pay for it with your increased taxes? Give me your thoughts on all of that. And when I come back, I want to talk to you as well about, these low emissions zones. Basically, if you've got I want to say rubbish car, but I don't mean rubbish car. I mean old car. Yes, old car.
Old
Sorry,
banger.
I know it just almost slipped out, but I don't mean that. If you've got an old car...
A classic car.
A classic car, that's it, yes, thank you.
Classic
Just positivity bailing me out. Anyway, long story short, do you think it's fair that you should have to pay to drive around your own towns and cities? Tell me your thoughts and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky. That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, we've got Martin Wright, the chair of Positive News, and Charlotte Pickles, the director of the Reform think tank. Juliet, you've been in touch saying, I've got some good news. The research breakthrough for dementia, the Alzheimer's stuff as well, you're absolutely right. That is very positive news. Well done for picking that up and flagging it to me as well. Suzanne says, Michelle, nurses should have it written into their contracts, basically, that they cannot strike. You say you think it's disgraceful that they're threatening this and that you don't think you'll be able to forgive them. I have to remind everybody that actually, you do have legal staffing limits, of course, and things like emergency care, for example, will still be maintained. So hopefully, I mean, you never know, but hopefully there shouldn't be a loss of life or anything because of these strikes, hopefully. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has been accused of pricing poor people off London roads by expanding what we call the ULEZ, the ultra-low emissions zone, throughout Greater London. This has been quite controversial because people like care home bosses say that their staff might not be able to get to work if they've got older cars, because those higher polluting cars will have to pay, get this, £12.50 a day to enter the zones. This is not just London, by the way. These things have popped up and down the UK. This is not a London-centric thing. And if you don't have one in your town and city and you're sitting there thinking, well, why should I care about this? We don't have one. Be careful, because these things are spreading right up and down the UK. So if you don't have it yet, never say never. Where do you stand on it?
Well, the reason that we have these things is that they work. Dirty, polluting cars, older cars, they do contribute massively to health problems. There's an Imperial College study showing 4,000 Londoners a year die as a result of bad air quality. 600,000 Londoners suffer from poor health, heart and lung conditions because of poor air quality. Since they did put in the ULEZ in London, air quality has improved. And nitrogen oxides, one of the main pollutants, been cut by a fifth. So we've got healthier streets as a result. It's also worth pointing out the limits aren't set at a draconian level. 19 out of 20 vehicles within London meet the emission standards, and most of those, or sorry, many of those who don't, commercial vehicles, diesel vans, etc. So most people's cars, most of the time, will actually meet the standards.
Well,
and of course, a third of the population don't own a car. The poorest people don't own a car.
So
and in
you
fact, in
don't
cities, it's
think-
even greater. Yeah.
You don't think that someone that's got an older car, I don't know, probably for cost reasons, and perhaps can't afford to upgrade, you don't think that's going to be disproportionately penalising them?
To some extent, that might happen. A lot of cars will actually meet the standards, and I think there's a degree of slight... well, I'd be a tiny bit sceptical about what the care home managers are saying. Care homes, a lot of them, don't pay their workers that generously. There are other ways of helping people get to work. You know, other organisations will lay on taxis, or they'll have a minibus arrangement, or they'll help people do car sharing, or they'll even help people join a local car club if there's something like that. So there are alternatives. It's not a perfect solution. Some people might lose out, but a lot of people...
But you're saying for the greater good is the point.
A lot of people are suffering from poor health as a result of bad air quality. And one way or another, we need to do something about it.
Charlotte?
Of course it's right that we have to do something about it. And, you know, we heard the sort of numbers in terms of the health impact there. But I think it would be naive not to think that, of course, this is going to impact those on the lowest incomes, because people on higher incomes tend to buy newer cars. They tend to change their cars more frequently. If you're on a tight budget, you stick with the, you know, old banger, if we can say that. You
No, you
had
can't
for a
say
long
that.
time.
I didn't
Can't
say that.
Well, I'm going to say it because do you know what? That is what, you know, and a lot of people will love those cars, but actually the brutal fact is they can't afford to buy
I'm
a
only
new one.
teasing, you can say it.
Thank you. No censoring on this show.
No censoring. Anything
exactly.
goes. If you've got
exactly.
an old banger, we celebrate.
Exactly. But I think there's a real, I think there's a really important broader point here, which is actually, in general, we are not doing enough thinking about how tackling climate change, which is an incredibly important topic, is going to impact those who are on the lowest incomes. There is going to be, you know, the people who are going to be hardest hit are going to be the poorest in society. And this is one example of that, but there will be many other examples, and we're not having enough of a conversation about that. And I just want to pick up the point about care workers, that rightly, you've suggested alternative ways, the shared minibus, the carpooling. You can't do that if you're a care worker providing domiciliary care, i.e. going to people's homes, because you have to travel throughout the whole day. There is no minibus that's going to go, right, I've been to this house and I've got to go to this house. You have to be able to drive. And you're right, care workers are on outrageously low pay. But the idea that actually adding more cost onto what is often local authority expenditure, paying for these care workers by saying, oh, you've got to pay to upgrade their cars, is again just not realistic. So we do have to think about poorer households and how we can support them, because we do need to tackle things like poor air quality, but we have to do it in a way that actually isn't penalising.
Yeah, and the poorest
those that are
households don't own cars. You know, we've got a third of the population
very
doesn't
poorest,
own a car.
but you also have a very, very low-income band above that who will own cars.
Yeah, and this is the band that I do worry about, because when we say, like, the poorest household and stuff, if you are, like, the ultra-poorest households in society, then you get benefits, you get support, whatever. And now there's this next layer up that don't quite tick that box. They, for whatever reason, they're just on the cusp of it, whatever. And they seem to be the ones, they don't really get a lot of support. They do get these extra penalties like this now. Someone's just got in touch with me, John. He's saying that him and his wife are both going to be affected by this. It's going to cost them an awful lot of money. They can't afford to update their cars, and they're really concerned about things like this. So it's this kind of group that I feel sorry for, that I feel are just getting battered from every single which way with very little help.
It is tricky. It is tricky. And I'm not saying it's a sort of, a dream solution. One aspect of it all is that public transport, especially outside of London, particularly outside of London, is so poor in so many areas that sometimes people, particularly in rural areas, they'd rather not have to run a car, or they'd rather not have to run a car very often, but they've got no choice because the buses are rubbish. You know, the trains aren't there, especially up north.
And
so
sorry,
using,
let's face it,
investing.
Most of the poorest people aren't living in the city centre either, so
That's
they are
true.
having to come
That
into
is
it.
true.
That is
That
the
is
point.
true.
Finish your thing, Martin. What were you going to say?
Improving public transport and using some of the revenue, hypothecating some of the revenue from this, in other words, using some of the revenue that you're taking from polluting cars in order to, and it's not just cars, I say a lot of it is commercial vehicles, is vans. A lot of cars, majority of cars do meet the standards. Using that to improve public transport would be a good use of the money.
But you see, I just worry about some of this because I know you talk about air pollution and stuff, and of course I don't want anyone to die because of air pollution, obviously, who would? But to me, I just feel like this is constant war on car drivers. I do. I look at the roads, half of them have been turned into bus lanes that pretty much are empty most of the time anyway, but you can't, heaven forbid you go in them. You've got these fines that are just absolutely absurd now. Heaven forbid you do anything wrong in your car, you'll be fined eye-watering sums of money. And you've got all these 20-mile-an-hour zones popping up absolutely everywhere. You've got these low-traffic neighbourhoods absolutely everywhere. To me, it's just like this constant war on people in their car. And if you don't want people in the car, to your point, sort out your public transport then. But they don't.
The 20-mile-an-hour zone is another matter.
Well, that's a matter that annoys me.
Does it?
Yeah, it does.
Well, if you hit a child at 30 miles an hour, you usually kill it.
Yeah.
If you hit a child at 20 miles an hour, it usually survives.
Yeah, so that's fine. So have these 20-mile-an-hour outside schools. Absolutely support that. We don't want you hitting children. Why then? Because it's not just outside schools.
No.
They're everywhere.
But in cities, actually, the average speed of traffic is lower than 20 miles an hour. So if you have a 20-mile-an-hour limit, and it's not on every road, but if you have a 20-mile-an-hour limit, you tend to get traffic flowing fairly smoothly. It's not going to be flowing more smoothly if it now and again goes up to 30 miles an hour and you have a guy who's been stuck in traffic, he suddenly accelerates up to 30 miles an hour because he's impatient.
It's not just cities
and
that
that's
the
where it's a
20 mile an
danger.
hour are being applied to. There's lots of areas in the countryside that 20 mile an hour is now being applied to. Lots of villages that it's being applied to. In fact, I live in a village that has just had a 20 mile an hour introduced instead of a 30, and I'm baffled as to why.
Are you itching to go at 30 through your village?
I would much rather go at 30, yes, quite honestly. And, you know, I don't remember the last time I saw a small child walking through there. So yes.
But if what you're saying anyway is that the average speed of cars in traffic is less than 20 anyway, well, you don't need a 20-mile-an-hour zone then, because if you've got loads of traffic, everyone's going slow.
Average speed, not the whole time, that's the issue.
And then when the roads are quiet, so like, I don't know, at 4 in the morning, if I'm a care worker and I'm just going from one house to another, there's not a soul on the street, certainly not a kid. You shouldn't have a kid out wandering the streets at 5 in the morning. Why do I need to be 20 miles an hour?
It would be possible to have smarter speed limits that adjust themselves to the conditions, the time of day, the traffic, etc., etc. And, you know, a little bit further down the line, I imagine we might have that applied in cities, just as you see on motorways. You know, you suddenly see a sign saying it's 50 miles an hour. So I imagine there might be technological ways of getting a bit cleverer about
Well,
this.
you tell me your thoughts on all of that. Are you someone that is worried about being able to afford to own your car? Are you someone that's on the other side of the fence that says, absolutely, people shouldn't be in their cars so much? Tell me your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to have some of your thoughts. Lots of you are emailing in. George says, there's always someone trying to make excuses for more and more and more controls. I think he means you talking about speed limits, got to be honest.
Never, really?
Right, it's going to take a quick break. When we come back, I will have lots more of your thoughts, and I want to talk to you about 4-day working weeks. Is that the future if you get paid the same? Tell me your thoughts. I'll see you in 2.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company till 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, Martin Wright, is the chair of Positive News and Charlotte Pickles is the director of the Reform think tank. I'm pleased to report that lots of you sensible individuals out there agree with me with my little rant about 20 miles an hour. I like that, that's very good. Some people, of course, though, agreeing with what you're saying in terms of, you know, lower the speed, the higher possibility to not hurt children, which is of course right, but my argument is, well, kids are not roaming around absolutely everywhere at all hours of the day, are they? Or at least they shouldn't be anyway. Many of you, again, I would say pretty much divided on the whole strikes issue in terms of where you stand on that. On the car front, Maureen says, Michelle, my diesel car is 17 years old. I bought it when Tony Blair told people to buy diesel. I've only got 41,000 miles on the clock. I maintain it regularly. And now it looks like I'm going to have to go without my car from next August. This, she says, is deeply unfair. I have to say, I agree with you. Right, let's talk work, shall we? 100 British companies have signed up for a 4-day working week without paying their staff any less. What do you think to this? Is this going to be the future of British working going forward? I hope so. I might lobby my boss, might go on strike. I might say, I don't want to do Monday to Thursday, and I might go on strike. Unfortunately for me, they'll probably replace me and won't even notice I've gone missing. Anyway, Martin, I'll pick up with you on this. 4-day working weeks.
I'm always reminded of Parkinson's law, you know, work expands to fill the amount of time available for it. I think this is a fascinating experiment, and in some ways you could see it could be kind of a new bargain between employers and employees, you know, so if as an employee, if part of the workforce, you're invited to really crack on when you're at work, really focus, you know, not allow those water cooler conversations to go over past 2 minutes, not spend too much time WhatsApping your friends about weekend plans and so on. Maybe come in early, and maybe come in an hour earlier, stay an hour later, and then return. You get a day off. You can see that working quite well, potentially. Of course, it's tricky in other areas. I think this tends to apply mainly to office work. I might be wrong, but I think where it's being tried out, it's mainly in offices. And you can imagine it's very different, obviously, for self-employed. A lot of self-employed people work, you know, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because I suspect that if we get away from the automatic assumption that you work 5 days, you have 2 days off at weekends, we could learn some things about individuals taking responsibility to really show up at work, and there could be some quite interesting results from it. So I think we can't know yet until quite a few different organisations in quite a few different sectors have given it a go.
Charlotte?
I mean, sure, if someone wants to pay me the same amount as I get and I can do less work, then, I mean, that's like the dream, isn't it? Yeah. Exactly. I think, I mean, many of the points I think have been made. I think one of the biggest challenges with this is the fact that it's another thing we were just talking about in terms of the low emission zones that does this slightly, benefit the wealthier and penalise the poorer. I think this is exactly, Martin's point that if you're working on an hourly wage, how does this apply to you? Because if you're paid by the hour and you do less hours, so is everybody going to also increase the hourly wage? And most people who work in low-paid jobs are on hourly wages, not salaries. As we've already heard, if actually you look at the companies that have signed up to this experiment, that's going on. They're largely kind of professional services, tech industry. They're very small companies as well, on the whole. Is this going to apply to a big supermarket or to a care home business? Probably not. So I think it's a nice idea, but do I think it's realistic to apply across industry? Probably not.
I mean, nobody's suggesting it as a regulation or as a law. This is just individual companies experimenting.
Oh, no, but there is a big campaign and, it's been floated within the Labour Party as well around doing 4-day weeks. The unions have talked about it. There's definitely a growing momentum. And I think the productivity questions are really interesting, and yes, of course, there will be, some individuals that I was going to say something ruder, which I won't, but take the mick at work and, don't put in the hours. Actually, I think that's more about how you run your organisation, the leadership in those organisations, how you treat your workers. But things like the water cooler moment you mentioned, that's one of the moments when often you get creativity, you get kind of, morale boosting, you get team members knowing each other. You don't want to cut out all that stuff. In fact, that was one of the worst things about people transitioning to work from home. You didn't get those moments where someone suddenly sparks an idea. It's been one of the most destructive things about the lockdowns and the shift to working from home.
Well, Linda, one of my viewers, she's quite harsh. She's saying, 4-day week, Michelle, her words, not mine. She's saying, you're going to give the British who are already lazy enough, she's saying, an excuse to be even lazier. Harsh, Linda, harsh.
Gosh.
I tell you, though, one of the things that makes me ponder when I talk about 4-day weeks and stuff, I've always been against this as a principle, but I'm starting to warm to the idea, is universal basic income.
Oh.
I know. I used to respond exactly like you. If anyone suggested that to me, I'd be like, oh, God, what a lunatic. But the more I think about it, we're messing around. We've got, all of this kind of, you're helping with this money, helping with that money, you've got benefits here, you've got this, that, the other. If everyone just had, I don't know, just say, I'm making my figures up to don't mock me, but just say 1,500 quid a month. Everybody. Then you could do work that you enjoyed to top that up. You could do whatever. You'd get rid of the benefit system.
It would be entirely unaffordable.
Well, you say it'd be unaffordable, but actually, if you wasn't, and I'm thinking on my feet here because I haven't actually done my sums to be able to come back here with a robust affordability plan. I do say I'm going to do my homework next time and tell you exactly how I would afford it. But no politicians say how they're going to afford it, so I'd fit right in. But yeah, I do think as a premise. What do you think to my little premise? Universal basic income.
There have been lots of experiments with it, and most of the experiments have been with a sum that you couldn't actually live on. They've been sort of 5,000 a year.
It's not been universal or basic.
Or so, exactly, not been universal basic. But I think it is an idea that will keep coming back, particularly as we move more to automation. And I think it's interesting. There was a survey done a few years ago showing that, and I wish I could remember the precise number, but it's around 80% of people basically hate their jobs. And you think, hang on,
you're supposed to bring us the positivity.
I am. Well, we've had 6,000 years of human civilization. We've got to the point where 80% of us, spend most of our waking hours doing something we don't want to. If there's a way that we can start to explore some alternatives to that, that would be a good idea. And whether it would be a combination of technology, of economic initiatives like universal basic income, a 4-day working week. Who knows? But let's try and get a bit creative.
Sounds like we're spending a hell of a lot more money without bringing any more money in this scenario. So I have looked at universal basic income. I worked for Ian Duncan Smith when he was Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. So, did a lot of work. I have done a lot of work on welfare. And to actually, again, to your point, to actually get what is a universal basic income, i.e. enough for somebody to be able to live on, it would be profoundly unaffordable. And, you know, the other thing people don't think about in this scenario is that we don't have a benefit system that treats everybody equally. And I mean that in a good way. So if you're profoundly disabled, you probably get more than that amount a month. So you couldn't give extra money
Yeah,
then
but
as well.
I'd give exceptions in my little plan. If there was someone that was disabled, obviously, and needed more assistance for their care, then obviously I wouldn't let them go without. But anyway, I don't know. It was just a thought. Let me know your thoughts on it. Carol says, well, Michelle, France has adopted a 35-hour week years ago, and that has worked brilliantly, Matt says. It's time we move past the idea of X-hour days and Y-day weeks. This was all basically harping back to the industrial era, where more hours were basically spent on a factory floor, had a direct correlation with output, he says. Move on from all of that. Tell me your thoughts at GBViews, at gbnews.uk. Speaking of the world of work, by the way, Labour reckon it would slash penalties on those job seekers. You know, you get your sanctions, don't you, on your benefits. Labour would look to reduce them, they say. They're treating job seekers like criminals. Do you agree with that or not? Tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company right through till 7 o'clock tonight is Martin Wright, the chair of Positive News, and Charlotte Pickles, the director of the Reform think tank. I've had a couple of messages in during the break about that whole 4-day working week. There's been some suggestion from my viewers at home. You're saying this basically has been dreamt up by what you think is civil servants. You're saying anyone that runs a business wouldn't have the whole concept of you can work 4 days but be paid for 5. I hear what you're saying there, I have to say. Michael, you say it is. You reckon only the people in the public sector that are doing this. I don't know if it is, you know. I think there are private sectors trialling this as well. Yeah. As Zen says, Michelle, you're getting near communism. Me? I don't think I've ever been called a communist. It's the first time for everything. I don't know what I've said that would give you that impression.
Giving everybody a universal basic income, treating everyone the same and handing out cash.
Oh, yes. I know. Well, I did say, to be fair to me, I did say I've always, poo-pooed this, but now I don't know if I've banged my head or something. I've been on holiday too long. But I don't know. I don't like to see people struggle.
Yeah, of course.
I don't. And I don't like complex, benefit systems and tax systems and complex. So I just think if you can remove complexity, it might be an idea, food for thought. I'm not saying we have to do it. I'm just throwing it out there, you know? Anyway, let's speak about, we've just been talking about the world of work. You've just mentioned that you were a former advisor to Ian Duncan Smith, so you're a great person to ask about this. Labour reckon that if they get into power, they would reduce the sanctions, the benefit sanctions on people that are looking for work. They're saying now that there's a suggestion perhaps that people are almost treated like criminals, their words, not mine, if they're job seekers. Where do you stand on it?
So I'm not sure it's 100% clear exactly what Labour are arguing here, is probably the first thing to say.
That is not a first, but carry on.
I mean, you may very well say that. But if we're thinking about what are the basic principles that should underpin a welfare system, then the idea you get something for doing something is a really important way of creating a legitimate welfare system. And people, people out there are very, well, we'll see what your viewers think, but are very clear that they think that if you are receiving money via taxpayers, so from the state, but funded by taxpayers, if you're receiving benefits and you can work, so we're not talking about people with, significant disabilities who aren't able to work. If you can work and you're not working, it is perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's completely justified to say you should be actively looking for work. You shouldn't be able to refuse work if it's offered to you, because it's not the state's responsibility to just fund someone who is choosing to be on benefits. But you have to think to back that up, and that's where conditionality comes in, and that's where sanctions come in. So if I decide, do you know what, I'm out of work, and actually benefits are very low, so I don't think this applies to many people, but I'm out of work, actually I don't really want to work, I've got my benefit coming in, like my UBI, but not universal. I've got my benefits coming in, and actually I'm not going to do anything. Well, then it's legitimate that the state should say, well, if you're not going to do your bit, if you're not going to keep your end of the kind of sort of semi-contract we've got, then we're going to deduct some of that money from you. That's perfectly acceptable. That is the definition of a fair system.
Do you agree, Martin?
Largely, yes. I mean, it's interesting. Now that you're a born-again communist, Michelle, you'll enjoy me quoting.
I'll move to China at this rate.
I think it was from the Communist Manifesto, but I can't remember. But that phrase, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. And that, and sometimes I think the left slightly forgets the first part of that. In other words, everyone should contribute. Everyone should contribute to society in one form or another. I think that the slight downside, or the element that Labour are criticising, I mean, job centre, I've not been in a job centre for a while, but I know they can be pretty dispiriting places. They're pretty tough places to work for the people who are working there. And I imagine I'm sort of, being devil's advocate a tiny bit here, I imagine what Labour are sort of gunning for is if people are just treated like, you're going to scam us, aren't you? It can be pretty dispiriting for them. And it would be nice if there was more of a focus on, OK, how are we going to help you contribute to society and have some dignity in feeling you're contributing to society, doing worthwhile work? I think the rise in apprenticeships is quite a positive thing. I think we need to do a lot more of that. But there are examples. There's something we're going to be covering in Positive News. There's an outfit in Manchester which is training long-term unemployed people in joinery and plastering and tiling and insulation to work in social housing. It's been really successful. Small, private company. So helping people rediscover some dignity through work, I think, is part and parcel of it all.
I agree. And actually, I have to say as well, I think that we need to look at how we do skill people, help people to get skills, be re-skilled. Katie says we could help the job seekers, Michelle, by making the job centre work properly. I've got to say, I did have a run-in once upon a time, a little while ago, with a job centre, with a work coach, whatever they're called. They were absolutely gormless. And I thought to myself, goodness me, you're supposed to be helping me get a job. And then you wonder why a lot of people are actually struggling. But yeah, you could do a lot more, couldn't you, to help people help themselves. Lots of positive news stories coming in, by the way. New babies being born, people becoming grandparents again. That's what I like to see. Nigel is up next. Nigel, good evening. Someone is not happy with me saying, you're mentioning Christmas lights again in November. Pack it in. Nigel, have you got your Christmas decorations up?
No, I haven't thought about it yet, but I will come the 1st of December tomorrow. I'll start beginning to think about it, I promise. Some extraordinary exchanges in the House of Commons today. I actually genuinely wonder on illegal immigration whether Prime Minister Sunak is actually deluded. I'll be debating that and asking you for your reactions to it. That and much else besides, but first, let's get the all-important weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGiven from the Met Office. During the next 24 hours, we're going to move into a new month and a new meteorological season, and it will certainly feel that way with a lot of low cloud, mist, fog, and feeling chilly for many of us. High pressure at the moment to the east of the UK is bringing a lot of settled weather, blocking weather fronts from moving in from the west, although this one across Northern Ireland and Western Scotland has been allowed in. That's been bringing some damp weather to Northern Ireland during the day. The rain reaches Western and Northern Scotland by midnight, and then it starts to spill into the rest of Scotland, the north of England as well, by dawn. Elsewhere across England and Wales, a lot of low cloud, mist, dense fog patches and a frost in places, -2, -3 Celsius for some sheltered spots first thing. So a gloomy and cold start to the day. Poor visibility on the roads first thing, that's something to watch out for, especially for central and southern parts of England and East Wales. The fog will gradually lift into low cloud and skies will brighten for southern parts of England, much of Wales. Scotland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, stay largely cloudy with outbreaks of rain clearing east through the day. Mild in the northwest, 11 Celsius. Cold where we've got some stubborn fog, slow to clear across central England.